Hi everyone, it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I'm here today with the Door Banner Club for December. What a fun wall hanging. This is just so cute. I love it. It's got the presents, it's got the trees, it's got everything that's fun about Christmas. So let's take a look at some of the elements. That's all I'm going to be teaching you today are 3 elements to this. The first one is the star block. So let's take a look at this. Now, if you've been following along with the videos, you know that the very first thing that you're going to do is label all your pieces. That is something I cannot stress enough when you're doing something like this. As you're cutting, they're giving you letters. Write them down on little return address labels, whatever. Cut them apart and get that stuff labeled. You'll be happy that you did. So what we're going to do, oh, we need our J block. Sorry about that. Okay. We have all of our elements here. So this is the dark star. The light star has a dark center and a light points. This is a dark star because it has a light center and dark points. I'm going to turn this over and let you see how we pressed all of this. We do a different type of pressing on our points here on the flying geese, and that I really do want to show you in detail how we did that and why. And then we have these seams are pressed open when we assembled the block. All right, so let's dive into this. So the first thing I have is I have an II rectangle here, and I have 2 little G blocks. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to draw a line down the center, and we're just using a friction pen and a ruler to do that. No surprise there. Then we're actually going to go sew on the line. All right, so let's go do that. All right, so I sewed right on the line. So I am actually going to take this to the iron. I'm going to iron away my friction pen and trim this 1/4 inch away from my stitching. All right. I'm going to iron this side to the white. I'm going to iron it to the cream color. I'm going to iron this backwards from what you would normally expect. The reason we're doing this is to get that point in the center to be extremely sharp. I'll show you how this works. All right, so there's my first one. Now we're going to put the second one on like this. Fits right on there. I've already drawn the line. I'm going to sew corner to corner on the line. Here we go. All right, so let's go ahead and trim this out. Now this one, I'm going to press this one towards the gold. So this one we press towards the cream. This one we're going to press this one towards the gold. Just like this. Perfect. So what I'm looking for is this point right here and how perfect that point is right now. These seams are pressed away from each other instead of stacked on top of each other. Because if you were pressing these both to the gold, you have a lot of bulk up here in this point. It's also very difficult to sew through. So if you've ever been piecing your flying geese and you're trying to sew across that point right here, and it's very bulky and you can hear your machine start thunking a little bit as it goes over that, like, whoa, that's some thick fabric right there. That's part of why that's happening. So by pressing your seams opposite like that, you are creating less bulk. You're spreading those seams out a little bit and spreading that bulk out, making this an easier point to catch and an easier point to sew. Okay, you can see how sharp all of our points are here in the center of this block. All right, so that is your little flying geese. Then you're going to take some LL squares and put on the side, and that's going to give you this. So you make 4 of these. 2 of them you're going to add squares to. This goes on here, this goes here, and attaches right to this, to your J squares in your center. All right, so that's how your star block goes together. And when we piece this, you're pressing in, right? You're pressing towards your center. You're pressing out. Here's this one. You press this out, away from your points. Again, away from your points. And here. But then when you put it together, you just have points everywhere. So that's when we actually go to press things open, is when you have points everywhere. Then we're just kind of spreading that bulk out in that fabric, and you can just see it's a beautiful block. All right, so that's how you make the small dark star block. All right, I'm back, and I'm going to show you now a small tree. This is the small tree block. I'm going to move some of my stuff out of the way, and as I do, I'm going to kind of talk to you about it. I am using good Schmetz top stitch needles. If you haven't changed the needle in your sewing machine in a while, treat your machine to a new needle. It will love you for it. I have some Wonder Clips on the table. These are mainly used for binding, but you could also use them to keep your pieces clipped together. If you have a bunch of pieces all just loose and you don't have a design board to put it on, or you have a cat that likes to help you, I have a cat that helps me. I use a lot of Wonder Clips to keep things together, and she tends to leave them alone because they're heavy. Little pieces she'll flick, but not usually with Wonder Clips. I have some patchwork pins, a seam ripper I'm hoping I'm not going to use today, a Carrera Aurifil thread set. I have the white thread on my machine today, and that is included in that Carrera set. It's got the black, the white, and the dark gray. And I think those are usually the 3 most common colors that we piece with upstairs in the sewing studio every single day. I do have a friction pen. I have a fresh blade in my rotary cutter. If you haven't changed your blade in a long time, go ahead and do that, and you're going to be amazed at how easy it is to use your cutter. Don't stress your wrist out, just change your blade. It's much faster. All right, I also have the seam guides from the Super Easy Guidelines seam guides. These are excellent tools to help you if you need to figure out a 1/4 of an inch. The seam guide setter is going to help you align your guides on your machine using a scant 1/4 inch. So if you need to sew with a scant 1/4 of an inch, a lot of us don't know where that is. That's a very a gray area in quilting. What is a scant 1/4? I know what a 1/4 is, but a scant 1/4, well, how scant? It's a trick. So instead, I use this Super Easy seam guide setter, and then I always know exactly where a scant 1/4 inch is when a pattern calls for that. The refill pack of seam guides, they stick to your machine, come on and off, so don't worry if you only get 6 of them, because you just take it off your machine and set it to the side when you're not using it, and then you can just easily stick it back down. The Cluck Cluck Sew diagonal seam tape, a lot of times we use that if you don't want to draw the line with a friction pen. Instead, you're just going to follow the bottom of your square diagonally right up, and you're going to sew right down the middle of your square. So the Cluck Cluck Sew tape is very nice for that if you don't want to draw the lines. For today, I'm going to show you drawing lines. I have another tool that I'm going to show you, and that is the Creative Grids 9-inch seam guide. I love this tool, and I'm going to show you why when we do some half square triangles. All right, so let's talk about our tree block. This is the small tree block. I'm going to turn this over. You can see we did press all these seams open except the very last one. I pressed that down towards the trunk of the tree. When doing this, we did that because of the points. You want your points to come out on the corners right here. And therefore, we pressed our seams open because that sharpens the points. Remember how on the small star block we were doing the alternating seams? We did exactly the same thing here. You can see that right here at this very top, flying geese. This seam allowance goes up. This one comes back to the green. making this intersection not as thick and heavy, and it just sharpens that point. All right? Okay, so let's look at some of the elements that go into this. Here's that flying geese block that I was talking about where we press them opposite. That's, of course, at the very top here. These flying geese all have the other side on them. Here he is right here. In fact, I just need to trim this. So this one, we pressed it down. This one, we're going to press that up. Let me go ahead and trim that, and I'll do that for you really quick. Heat that seam up, and this one just goes straight up, just like that. All right, so you see that? That's how all of these were made right here. Okay, all right, there's our flying geese. So now we have half square triangles. Half square triangles, we're going to start with 2 oversized squares. The directions tell you to draw a line down the center and then sew 1/4 inch on either side of that. Well, I'm going to show you why I like this seam guide by Creative Grids. I'm going to lay it on my block, and I'm going to make sure the very tip of my point is right there in this groove, and it's also in the middle of this groove. So there's my points. I know now that this tool is exactly in the center of the square. So I'm going to draw a line on one side, hold the seam guide, and draw a line on the other. So what I've done is I've given myself a line to actually sew on, where if you just draw a line in the center and you sew 1/4 inch on either side, I don't know where that 1/4 inch is. Depends on your foot. Do you have a good 1/4 inch foot or not? A lot of quilters don't know where that is. I'm one of them. I would much rather draw the line and sew on the line because I know it's a lot more accurate to do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put my 2 squares together. I'm going to use my extra fine patchwork pins by Clover. I love these pins. They are my favorite for doing patchwork. All right, and I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch on either side. All right, let's go do that. All right, so I'm going to remove my pins, and I'm going to cut right down the middle of this block, corner to corner, like that. Okay, now I'm going to press this towards the dark green. I'm going to go for the darker color here, set your seam, and press it open. Let's do that again. And press it open. All right, now whenever I do that, I always want to square up my block. All right, so I'm going to grab my spinning mat and we're going to get this squared up. All right, so I've got my spinning mat on the table now. This is the Creative Grids spinning mat. I really like this mat. It's my favorite. There's a lot of other spinning mats out there. This one I feel is the safest mat that I have found, and I've tried them all. This mat has, I want to show you the bottom of this really quick. It has a foam on it, and this foam base will actually grip your table. And I have another cutting mat on here. So you can see it'll slide a little bit, but not a lot. But the minute I put pressure on it, the only thing that's spinning is this. The whole mat is not spinning away from me. Okay, so I have my little square right here that we just made. I have a 2.5 by 2.5 inch Creative Grids square ruler here, and it has a diagonal line in it, and it also has a lot of grip. I love that about Creative Grids. They put a lot of grip on the back of their rulers. All right, so I'm just going to hold on to this, and I'm going to cut and spin all the way around. There we go. Now I have a perfect 2.5 inch square. I like squaring up like that. I take a little tiny bit off of all 4 sides. Then I know that I've cleaned every edge and that it is perfectly square. All right, that's how I do half square triangles. All right, and then you're just going to put your half square triangles together with your flying geese blocks. This is again, sew and flip again. Let me press this out. These rectangles here are just sew and flip. Go ahead and press that. There we go. These go here. This goes here. You make another one the opposite. And that's pretty much all there is to this block. Half square triangles, flying geese. Remember to press your seams, alternate your seams when you're doing your flying geese. Half square triangles, you can draw your line in the center and sew a 1/4 inch on either side. You can also use a seam guide, and that will help you get that 1/4 inch exactly where it needs to be on either side. I find it faster to take a second to mark that second line, because then I can just sew on the line and I don't have to think about exactly where my foot is on that block. All right, so that is your tree block. Let's turn this over one more time and show you again. We pressed all of these seams open, and this last seam to the stem, we just brought that right down toward the tree stem right here, because there's no points here. So we just brought that right down. Okay, that is the tree block. I'm going to get all this cleaned up and find my present block, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, and this present block is actually constructed very uniquely. I like the way she did this. So first of all, we're going to start with a flying geese, just like this. We have our flying geese, and yep, you guessed it, we are pressing this way and this way with it and turning it this direction. And we have our 2 rectangles that go on the end. Okay, that's how we're doing the top. I'll just set those right there. Now let's look at the ribbon. So the ribbon is unique. I like the way the bow is coming down onto the package. I think that's very clever. Right, so we just have a sew and flip. So you can see how this is put together. And so we're just going to sew and flip and turn this down. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. There we go. And press. Just like normal, just like we've been doing. Just like that. And then these go together to make this. And then these 2 are attached. Let's look at that. Now we press that seam open. The reason we press that seam open is we have a lot of bulk here. We have our points. We have these points are coming together right here. We decided that was the best way to do that. So you can see how that was pressed. That is the top of our gift. There's our bows. Our bow, I love that. All right. The next piece you have is an R rectangle. It's going to go here. The next piece we have is a smaller package like this. And we're just simply going to put these together. So I can take this. Let's just line these seams up. Definitely pin this on the edges. I always pin this edge over here because I find that as I'm sewing down a seam, by the time I get to about right here, these 2 pieces are walking away from each other. And I have to stop and readjust them to make them behave themselves. And I don't like doing that. So I just decided I'd pin that right now ahead of time so that it remembers it has to stay there. All right, I'm going to do it just like that. I'm just going to sew from here all the way down, watching this point right here. So I want to sew right here where these cross into a cross. X marks the spot is right where you want to hit that. So right through there, and you'll know you're going to hit that point right on. Okay, let's go do that. All right. Let's take this to the ironing board. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this toward the rectangle that has nothing on it. I have no seams on that. That's the way I'm going to press this. And you can see, oh, that looks perfect. That's exactly what I want to see. I have this point is exactly where I want it, nice and sharp. That is perfect. All right, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to sew this onto here, just like this. So I'm going to sew this with this piece up facing me because of all these seam allowances that I have going every which way. I'm going to make sure that they don't flip the wrong way. That always happens when I'm sewing a seam and I put those face down. It seems that that machine will grab them, and my bead dogs grab them and they flip, and you don't even know it until you take it to the ironing board, and then you have to be unstitching. I don't like unstitching my seams. So we're going to just sew with these seams up. I just put a pin just to remind them I want them to lay flat, and I definitely pin the end. So I'm going to start here and go all the way to the end. All right, let's get our pins out. And again, I'm going to press this back toward that rectangle. So I'm going to turn it over and put the rectangle on top because that's what I'm pressing towards. This and right over, just like that. And give it a little bit of steam if you need to, just to coax those seams into place. That looks great. All right, and that is a present block. I think it's a very clever design. This was done by Riley Blake, designer Jerry Robinson. She designed this block. It is so cute. So all you're making are flying geese and half square triangles, so it's simple sew and flip, and that's how you make all of your elements, just like that. Whoop. There we go. Thank you for joining me today on this tutorial. Thank you to Riley Blake for allowing us to show you some tips and tricks on how to get these seams to lay nice and flat, some tips on how to get these intersections nice and flat, and do some fun flying geese and sew and flip piecing techniques. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.